Now let's start the first live stream. So we're starting with the
If you've just
first
opened
hour
Blender for the first time and then you've tried to do things, maybe trying to see how far you can
There we
go
go.
without getting help, you might have discovered you need help immediately. You can't even move things without a tutorial. But the good news is you don't need to learn everything that you can see, right? I, for example, have been using Blender for 18 years and I still have not touched some parts of Blender, like scripting, never touched it, because I don't need to for what it is that I'm trying to do. This fly is going to kill me. It's if you're familiar with the 80-20 rule, I think there's really about 20% of Blender's features that you'll use in 80 or 90% of projects. And that's what I want to teach you in this tutorial series. And then since I think doing is the best way to learn, along the way we'll also be building our very own donut, of course. Donut, what I'm known for. This is the third time I'm making a donut tutorial series. Every time Blender releases a new version, I make this series. So if you finish this full series, you will end up with a donut that looks very similar to this. So let's get started. This big window that you can see right here opened up, this is called the 3D viewport, and it's where you'll spend probably 90% of your time, because everything you need to visualize, whether it's an animation or an arc-viz or anything like that, it all happens right here. So by default, you can see you get 3 objects. You've got a cube, you've got what looks like a ball on a piece of string, that's a lamp, and then you've got a camera, this little, what would you call that, like a triangle arrow looking thing, that's a camera, okay? And then if you were to render this by going to render image, or hitting the hotkey F12, it would take a snapshot from that camera view, okay? And although this looks very similar to what you were just looking at, this one actually has lighting information, okay? You got shadow, you got some light coming off the top here, and if you had textures or materials and everything else, it would all be calculated, okay? So if you've already used other 3D software, you're already familiar with the concept, but this is one of the basic principles of 3D rendering. What you build in the 3D viewport is...
This is just for when I eventually record this. I am doing this challenge where I'm basically doing 300 hours, so 100 hours of game development, drawing, and 3D development, 3D art. I'm going to do 100 hours of each, all live streamed. Probably some time off live stream too, just so I can do it by myself. And I'm going to upload it all, so hopefully at the end of these 300 hours I will actually be somewhat decent at this.
It's sort of like a simplified version of what it is you're trying to create. And then when you're ready for that final image, you hit render, and then it uses your CPU or your GPU to crunch all the numbers and calculate the light and the bounce.
That's a mistake. There we go.
And everything like that to create that final beautiful image. So that's the basics. All right, but you might notice, like, okay, well, all right, can we move this thing? How do we even do something basic like move it? There's 2 ways you could do it. One would be to use the move tool in your toolbar. If you activate that, you can see that over the cube now you get these arrows. And if you were to click and drag on any of those arrows, you would move it along that axis. If you clicked on the white circle in the middle, then that would just be sort of like free dragging it, okay? Now, you could do it that way, but actually, I never do it that way, because it is far easier to just learn the hotkey, which in this case is G for grab. Okay, so if you just hit G, your cursor doesn't have to be anywhere near it, and I'm not clicking, my hands are off the clicker, it's just attached to your cursor basically the moment you hit G. And then if you just do a single left click, it will confirm its movement. So G, click. And my cursor could be anywhere, right? And I can do it, which is actually good, because you don't have to like think about where is my cursor, do I have to like get it on here and then hit it? No, it's really, it just allows you to work really fast. Excuse me while I get a drink of water. I know I'm only 2 minutes into the video. 4 minutes. All right, anyways. Now, one thing you're missing with this is those axes lines, like being able to move it along a specific axis is actually a really common action. You want to use it all the time. And you can do that after you have hit G by typing the letter of the axes. So there are 3 axes, and the axes letters are X, okay, which is the left and right, Y, which is back and forwards, and then Z, which is up and down. Some 3D softwares call the Y axis the up and down, but Blender's it's the Z, the blue one. Alternatively, you can also, as you're moving it, if you hold down on your mouse, on your scroll wheel, if you push in, that's called the middle mouse button, push in until it clicks, and just hold that. You can see you get this little line that draws out, and then you can just, on your scroll wheel, if you push in, that's called the middle mouse button, push in until it clicks, and just hold that. And you can see you get this little line that draws out, and then you can just drag it to the nearest line, nearest axis, and it will automatically snap to that, which is really handy. Pretty cool. Not too bad. Okay, so that's moving things. Now, the other 2 actions that are really common is rotate and...
Fully forgot to start my timer. What part is this? There you go. And let's try this as the first hour now. Now we're getting our first hour done. And let's just move this timer here. Nice and big. Make it nice and red. There we go.
Scale. And you can, again, you could use the tool just by clicking here, and then you can, you know, rotate it on a specific axis. You could click in the middle and like do a trackball thing. Scale, exact same thing. Scale it like that. But again, I recommend learning the hotkeys, which you can learn just by hovering over it. Yeah, the hotkey for this one, so where it says shortcut, shift spacebar, it's technically true. You could activate it from this little menu here if you hit shift spacebar, but it's the one after that. Oh, really easy to remember. R for rotate. Okay, so rotate, and then you can hit the letter of the axes as well, or do that same holding the middle mouse button. Oh, that's weird. Maybe because I did it after tapping it. Anyway, and then you've got scale, which is hovering over it, S for scale. Okay, S, X, Y, and Z, like that. And if you want to cancel a movement, you can hit escape, or you can just right-click as well, and that'll also cancel the movement. But yeah, so you can see you can do quite a lot just with those few little movements there. Okay, so that's how you move stuff about. Now, let's talk about the next thing you probably want to learn is like, how do I actually move my view? Like, how could I look and explore the rest of the scene? And that is also done with your middle mouse button. Okay, so if you click in on your scroll wheel until it clicks, you are orbiting. That is how you orbit. And my laptop people with trackpads, you are panicking right now because you just realized you don't have a middle mouse button. You can do it in a pinch by going to the top right-hand corner. There's a little gizmo. And if you just click and drag on that, you can see that you are able to free rotate around. Alternatively, you can also go Edit Preferences, and then underneath Input, if you click Emulate 3-button mouse, this will enable you to, holding down Alt, if you then hold down left click, it just does the same thing as the middle mouse button. which is pretty cool. It's not bad. Whilst you're here, by the way, you might also, depending on the size of your screen, you might want to change the resolution, because by default it's 1, which on my 4K monitor you can see that my buttons and the text is really small. And if you crank it all the way up, you can get it to something comfortable. 0.4 or 5 is what I would normally go for. And by the way, I'm snapping it, like as you're dragging something, if you hold down control, it's using incremental numbers, so it keeps it to like a whole number. I'd normally go like 1.4 if I was using it myself, but it's a tutorial, so I'll keep it big so you guys can see what I'm getting at. Cool. And another thing, just while I'm here, just mentioning, some of you are from other 3D software, 3ds Max, Maya, that kind of thing. You might find it helpful to know there's an industry compatible key map that you could enable, which I'll put them up on the screen here, but it's more common keyboard shortcuts if you're used to other software. But for this tutorial series and everyone else, I recommend sticking to the Blender one, because of course, all the hotkeys and everything you'll learn whilst learning Blender will be for this hotkey thing. Anyways, all right, okay, so that's orbiting. Okay, now you can see as I orbit around, it's like locked on to my middle of my screen here. Okay, if I want to move somewhere else, that is pan, which is shift middle mouse button. Okay, now I'm shifting my view to somewhere else where I could pan around that place and shift again. And if you're on a trackpad, you could also use this, move the view, this little hand icon thing at the top there. Do invest in a mouse, please. You will need it for 3D. You really should get a mouse. It's going to be tough. The other thing that I'm doing right now is I'm using the scroller to zoom in and out. You can also use this little magnifying glass up there, or hold down control and then again click in on the middle mouse, and that will use a smooth movement rather than the scroll wheel, which is quite jaggedy. Okay, cool. So let's say you've moved the cube all the way over there. Like, okay, so you could, if you wanted to go and inspect your cube,
I started this a little late.
Work your way over there by using shift middle mouse button to pan over there. But it is far easier to just learn the hotkey number pad period, which will focus on any selected object. So if I want to go to my camera over there, I can select my camera, and number pad period will take me over to there. Again, my laptop users are going, oh no, I don't have a number pad. All right. The alternative way to do it is hold down the tilde key, which is that weird key underneath your escape key you've probably never used before. That brings up a pie menu with a bunch of view options, and view selected is focus. View selected will take you there. Okay, cool. So we've learned orbiting with middle mouse, shift middle mouse to pan, and then control middle mouse to zoom in and out or scroll. The other one you probably want to learn is align your view to axes, because it's something that new beginners often end up like upside down, and they're like, how did this happen? So you can go to bring yourself the right way up just by clicking one of these letters on your axes up here. Okay, so if you click that, I'm now the right way. Well, am I the right way up? Yes, I'm the right way up. I'm just focused on a weird part of the scene. That's why it's very weird. Alternatively, instead of these, so there's the 3 axes that you could snap yourself to. You could also learn the hotkeys, which is number pad 1 for front view, 1 for front view, 3 for side view, and 7 for top view. That's only number pad. It doesn't work for your keys along the top unless you wanted to enable that over here, emulate number pad, and then it would do that. But yeah, so that's handy as well. You might also find you'll notice, that in this view, this is orthographic mode. Okay, so we can't see the other sides of our cube right now. It's a weird looking cube, but we can't see the other sides because this is orthographic mode. It's like looking at it with like a focal length of like infinity, right? So there's no depth in our scene right now, which is actually really handy, and it defaults to it for this align to view thing immediately, because you usually want that. But the hotkey for that is number pad 5, and that will take you in and out of perspective mode. You can also do it up there like that. You can see the difference. Oh, and another way that you could see align to view, because there's a couple of ways. You could also use that tilde key. That'll take you to the top, the right, the side, etc. You could also use in the viewport, you could change those. It's also got the hotkeys there if you happen to forget them. And the other way is the same as ZBrush, if you're familiar with ZBrush. I just cleared the location of that with Alt-G. You don't need to remember that one. That's a weird one. Similar to ZBrush, holding down Alt whilst middle mouse button orbiting will also snap it to the nearest axes, which is also really handy as well. So if I'm like moving around and I'm like, I want to look up, just hold down Alt and it'll just snap it there, which is really handy. So that's kind of the 3D viewport. We'll obviously get way more into this as we delve into the other lessons. But whilst we're here, these other sections over here. So on the right hand side, this is your properties. And as you can imagine, it's the properties of things in the 3D viewport. Or the scene. You could change render settings or things here. And look, there's a lot here. Like I would strongly recommend not trying to learn all the values because you're not going to remember them anyway. We'll go through them as they're needed in this tutorial series. I think the best way to learn is to just do for something that you need to do. So that's what I try to teach. These options, some of these options will change depending on what is selected. So like if my camera is selected, you can see I get a camera icon and then I could change some camera settings. If my cube is selected, I get some material settings, right? I could click material and I could change the color to red and I could see a beautiful gray red color. It's a weird looking red. The reason it's not changing over here in the 3D viewport is because, again, this is a simplified view of the final render. So there's no material property. If you've just opened Blender for the first time and you've tried to do things, maybe trying to see how far you can go without recommend sticking to the Blender one because easier to just learn the hotkey, number pad period, which will focus in the view, these other sections over here. So on the right hand side, this is your properties. And as you can imagine, it's the properties of things in the 3D viewport, or the scene. You can change render settings or things here. And look, there's a lot here. Like I would strongly recommend not trying to learn all the values because you're not going to remember them anyway. We'll go through them as they're needed in this tutorial series. I think the best way to learn is to just do for something that you need to do. So that's what I try to teach. These options, some of these options will change depending on what is selected. So like if my camera is selected, you can see I get a camera icon and then I could change some camera settings. If my cube is selected, I get some material settings, right? I could click material and I could change the color to red and I could see a beautiful gray red color. It's a weird looking red. The reason it's not changing over here in the 3D viewport is because, again, this is a simplified view of the final render. So there's no material properties in this view. We'll get to the viewport rendering later on, but for now, you would see it though if you were in rendered, again, F12 to do an actual render. Now, at the top here, we have got a outliner. So this is keeping a running inventory of everything that you've got in your 3D viewport at the moment. So we've got 3 objects and we've got 1 collection. So a collection is just, it's like a folder, basically. Simple way to think of it. So you can like organize things. You can rename things just by double clicking on it. Yeah, whatever, right? And so that'll automatically update as you add things to the scene. If I were to duplicate my object, which I could do by hitting Shift D to duplicate, you can see there's created another object right up there in the outline. So if I ever like lose something and I'm like, oh, where's that thing? I can just find it on here and then just, bam, whoops, bam. Oh, by the way, I just accidentally tapped number pad 0, which is how you can look through the camera view. You could also do it by hitting the little camera icon on the right there, or by going viewport, camera, or by hitting the tilde key. So there are 4 places to get viewport options depending on what device or whatever it is that you're looking at. I deleted something by hitting X. You could also do it by hitting delete. By the way, I'm throwing a lot of keys at you, keyboard shortcuts. It's a lot to take in, especially when you're starting. So I created a keyboard shortcut PDF, and the link for that is in the description. It's just a list. It's like 3 or 4 pages of the most common hotkeys that you'll need to learn. or you might need to reference as you're using Blender. So you can basically load it up on another monitor whilst you're working, and you've got it there as reference.
I just prefer it.
I used to make it like a bonus for signing up for my newsletter, but now I'll just make it free. So you don't have to subscribe. You can just click that link, view it, and hopefully that'll make it easier to use Blender. You can still subscribe to my newsletter. It's a weekly newsletter on tutorials, artworks, and things that I find in the 3D industry. So if you want to keep up to date and learn new things, you can subscribe to that in the description as well. But that's it for this one, because we have covered quite a lot of ground, so we'll keep it simple and yeah, open up a brand new scene. This tutorial series was brought to you by my company Polygon. High quality models and textures for better renders. Alright, enough faffing around as my mate.
On to the second tutorial.
We have learned the basics of the interface, all the hotkeys, we've fooled around. Now we're going to start building that donut. Okay, so we are going to delete our default cube, which is just the delete key. X, which is the older shortcut. And we're going to replace it with something new. So to add a new object in Blender, you need to go up to Add, up here, and you get this long list. Or you can hit the hotkey, which is what I'm going to be using for the tutorial, Shift A. And truthfully, most of these options, wow, a lot of the options you rarely use. Like Speaker, I don't think I've ever used. Most of the time what you're looking for is mesh, because to render anything, you really need to start with a mesh. Like, if you followed like a character tutorial, you might be surprised when they're like, all right, start with a cube, and then, you know, we'll bip-biddy-boo, and we'll form the character eventually from that, right? But you have to start with something. So usually you pick the object which most resembles what it is you're trying to create. And in this case, there's a really easy one. It's the donut-shaped one, the torus. Torus. That is a word I never would have learned, except for Blender. I would have called that a donut, but evidently the mathematicians decided they need a special word for it. Okay. When you add an object and do certain actions actually in Blender, you get options straight after adding, okay? But they're kind of hidden because they're trying to stay out of the way unless you need them. And it's down there in the bottom left-hand corner. There's a little box, which if you click it, it expands. And then you get options like the resolution and the size, unless you need them. And it's down there in the bottom left-hand corner. There's a little box, which if you click it, it expands. And then you get options like the resolution and the size of it and everything. Now, if you don't see that box, it's probably because you accidentally clicked off it.
Fuck, I did.
It'll only show it after you've just added it. If you click off it, it assumes you're fine with it. You're good, okay? Now, if you haven't done another action since then, if you haven't edited it and clicked on something else or whatever, you can temporarily bring it back one last time, really, until you do something else, with F9. Okay, so F9 will bring those same options back just at your cursor, basically. But if you don't see it, then, you know, just re-add it, delete it, and re-add it, and you'll get those options back again. Okay, so with this, let's make some changes to it. Okay, so for starters, this is a very thin donut, and you want to know this maybe, but this is the third time I've made this donut beginner series. Every time there's a new version of Blender, I make this series again. So this is number 3. And basically, for the last 5 years of my life, I have been seeing every day on Twitter when somebody tags me in their donut render. And I've become very good at realizing the attributes that make donuts look good. And I think the best donuts are the ones that look thick. The ones that look like, oh yeah, I want to sink my teeth into that because it's got a lot of icing, it's got a lot of dough. I don't know, just something about a fat donut.
About right.
Like, yeah, that looks delicious. So I'm going thick this time, okay? And then the major segments and the minor segments, these are, as you can probably see, we'll call it the resolution of our donut, but it is it's the amount of geometry. Okay, so this, you are probably tempted to go like really high, because this is what I did when I first started using Blender in 3D. I'm like, I'm trying to make something high quality and realistic, so it's got to be smooth. Okay, so I'm going to go really high res. It's actually the opposite. You do not want that. I immediately realized when I started using this is a terrible idea. For one, you can't go back. Okay, when you go high. You can, if you go low, you can add other things, which is what we're going to do, to make it smoother, but it's harder to go back. And also with this, it takes longer to render. It's harder to work with because it's a bigger file. Your viewport slows down, your computer's whirring away harder. And also it is harder to work with, okay? When we enter edit mode, and we're going to do this later and like do some edits and stuff here, I have to work with this many vertices, these little points, and that is just too much. So you actually want the exact opposite. So we want to keep it as minimum. Okay, so the minimum amount of detail depends on what it is you're trying to create. We could go like really low, but we're actually going to use part of this donut for the icing. So I'm trying to think, okay, what am I going to do with the icing? Am I going to make some like dribbly bits going down it?
I would.
I don't know. Having done this a few times, I think I'm going to go with around like somewhere around 40 to 20. Something like that. Let's go 16. 16 looks good. By the way, and you would never know this, because how could you if you're a beginner, but like it's also a good idea to try to keep square faces, because as a general, if you're making something organic, and it's going to be smooth, if it's got rectangular faces, it can like stretch the shading and things just start to look weird. So I'm trying to keep it generally to a square face. Doesn't have to be a hard rule, but something like that. All right, then I'm going to click off it, and I'm done. And I can't get those options back, temporarily, with F9. But you get the idea. Okay, cool. So, great. Let's talk about, first of all, the size of this donut, okay? Because although it looks like, you know, what is the scale of our scene here, right? We're like looking into the distance there, like, how big is this grid floor? We don't know. It could be microscopic. It could be, 500 meters. It could be landscape size. We don't know. We actually do. Okay, so each one of these grid
It's like 1 meter?
here. Is it 1 meter or 2? I think it's 1 meter.
I'm going to guess 1.
Yes, it is 1 meter. Okay,
Yeah.
so this, actually, the size of our donut is humongous. It is 3 meters by 3 meters. Okay, so if you, sorry, I didn't tell you the hotkey. N will bring up your properties. Very handy, convenient shortcut. You just bring it up when you want to learn. Click on your object, and then go to item, and then you can see details around your object. Okay, so it's 3 meters by 3 meters, which is like roughly like 2 people laying down lengthways. By the way, speaking of that, if you are American, for my American audience, you can change your units to be Wacky Imperial, and you can get 9.9 periwinkles, or whatever it is. I don't know. You can do that. I'm gonna use 3 meters because the rest of the world is also watching. All right. So this obviously needs to be much smaller. So we're going to scale it. Scaling the hotkey S. Scale it right down to the size of a donut, which I've learned is around about, like, the biggest size would be around about like 10 centimeters, right? Yeah, roughly. So yeah, 10 centimeters is what we're looking for. Something like that. We could have done it when we added the torus, but that was radius, and radius is like, you got to double it to make it. And I'm like, just scale it down after we make it, and it'll be much easier to figure out. Okay. Now, the other thing I want to do is apply the scale, because, and this is another thing you would never know if you're a beginner, but it's sort of a running joke in the 3D world, but like, anytime you run into a problem with your mesh, something's not working, apply the scale. Because if your scale is wrong, other things tend to perform wrong, like modifiers and other things like that. So this scale here should pretty much always be 1 if you can, yeah, try and make it always 1, roughly speaking. So to apply your scale, you go Control A and then hit scale. Okay, so Control A for apply and then scale. And now it is 1. Nothing has changed, but it just means things will look better in the future. And I'm just doing it because I know I'll forget it, and then they'll be like in the comments, and people go, why is mine messed up? And it's because of this part I didn't say hit. Anyway, all right. Okay, so how do we get rid of these jagged lines? Because that's probably your next question. How do we get rid of the jagged lines? There are two types of shading in Blender or in 3D. Flat and smooth. So by default it is flat. To change it to smooth, you just right click and then hit shade smooth. Okay, and when we do that, it is basically like for these faces here, it has taken, instead of treating each face separately, if they're an adjacent face, it's going to like stretch the light across. It's going to treat it as if it is one continuous face rather than 2 faces. So for organic objects, which means like things that are flowing essentially, or round things maybe, you generally want smooth things, and then for like architecture or hard surface things, you want flat things. So shade smooth. So we've got rid of that. That's good. Now you'll notice that it has not fixed the silhouette of our object. Okay, so shade smooth is a illusion. Okay, it's not actually adding any geometry, which is great because it's lightweight, it's easy to work with. It's not adding geometry, but your silhouette will still be broken, or it will still look jagged. The only way to fix that is to add more detail. It's something that games, that's kind of the thing. If you want to look at a game and go like, I wonder how poly this thing is. Like, look at the silhouette of a character or the shape of a building or something like that. And if you see jagged lines, you can basically see the mesh, like how high poly something is by the silhouette. So we can fix that with something called a subsurf operation, okay, or subdivision. And there are a few ways to do it, but the way we do it in Blender is with adding a modifier. Okay, so we click this little wrench. Or is it a spanner?
Holy
Is
shit.
it a spanner? It's been a while since I got my hands dirty. Anyways, it's the
What the fuck
modifier
am I
panel
looking at?
over here. And then go up and underneath add modifier. If you click it, you get a whole bunch of different options here. And the one that we're looking for is, I mean, you use it so often. I wish it was at the top, but it's not. It's down here, subdivision surface. So you click that, and you might see that it has now smoothed out ever so slightly. You can see that edge there, the jagged edge is no longer there. Or it is there, but it is less. So what is subsurf, it's called a subsurf, even though it's called subdivision. Subsurf modifier, what it is doing is and I'm going to temporarily turn this off by that little icon there, that's viewport. So if you uncheck that, it's disabling it for your viewport. And that one is for render. It's disabling for your render. Okay, so what it is doing is, you can see the edge there, right? There are 3 points that make up that edge there. Subsurf is now adding in, it's doubling the amount of
see
detail
that. It
across
is
the entire
not
mesh,
hard.
not just the silhouette, the entire
Holy
mesh.
shit.
Every single point, it is now adding another one. Now, if you do 2 levels, so levels viewport and render, you can probably guess, that's just one operation. Okay, if I set this to 2, which is what you would see, set it to 2, which is what you see when you would render it, it's doing it again. Okay, so it's, I guess the word's exponentially. It's exponentially adding detail every time you add this. So it's going to do it again and again and again. So obviously you don't want to go too high, because otherwise your render times will be crazy, and yeah, you just want to keep it as low as possible. So often I keep it 1 or 0 whilst I'm working in the viewport, and then for the render I keep it at like 1 or 2 or something. Anyways, all right, okay, so we're spending a little long on this, but I need to just give you some background on how to make things look smooth without really going high res. Okay, so as I teased before, this mesh is made up of little points, and we can edit those points and adjust things and whatnot by going into edit mode, which you can do by hitting tab on your keyboard. Okay, another way is to go up to the top left hand corner, change from object mode to edit mode. Okay, so tab is just a fast way to switch between those 2 modes. Another way, third way, because why not? Control tab will bring up the pie menu, and then you can enter into, along with just object and edit mode, but like texture paint and sculpt mode. And we'll do a bunch of stuff later on, but edit mode. Okay. So in edit mode, we can see that we're now able to see the skeleton roughly that makes up our mesh. Okay. Each of these little points are what makes up our mesh. So these points are called vertices. Sorry, a single one is called a vertex. Multiples are called vertices. Always get them confused because it's got an S on it as well. It's like vertices, vertexes. It's not vertexes, it's vertices. Anyways, these little points make up our mesh. And on each of these points, if you've got 3 or more, usually 4 is the ideal one you're usually aiming for when you're making meshes, you can make a face. Okay, so if I just delete, I'll just hit X and I'll show you what it looks like without a face. Okay, so between each of these points there, I'll add another one with F, there is a face. Okay, so all the points together make up a face, and then that makes up your mesh. So what this means is that with these points, if I want to change the look of my mesh, I can take some of these points and I can move them. Okay, and you use the exact same hotkeys as you did before. So to move something, it is G for grab. Okay, so if I move this up and then go back out of edit mode to object mode, you can see as I move around, it's now got a little lump on it. Okay, pretty handy. So I could do that, right? I could tweak the shape of my mesh. Okay, so let's say like I wanted to, like make my donut look kind of like lopsided, or like add some detail, because this is necessary, by the way. Your brain, when it thinks about objects, because because you've seen them so many times, it simplifies it in your head. You think of a donut as being round, but it's bumpy, it's lumpy. It was thrown in the fire. The guy who like made the dough, it was all lopsided. But in your head, you just think of it as a round circle. The digital world will always give you the perfect thing. So you need to go in and add those imperfections. There's an old quote, don't know who said it. Imperfection is the digital perfection. Yeah, I don't know. It's very, very true. So think of that. So anyways, we need to add some lumps to it and make our donut lopsided. So if we held down shift, we could select multiple points, and then we could drag these out. I could do this. I could, slowly go through it. Now this is tedious, as I'm sure you can see. Clicking, lots and lots of clicking, little points. And that's really because that's not the way I would do this. What I would do, which is a feature that you use all the time, and that is proportional editing. So if you click this little button at the top here, or the hotkey for that is O, turn that on and off. What this will do is that now when I rotate scale or hit G to grab and move it, now it's actually grabbing vertices around it and it is moving it together as a whole. Now by default, your proportional size is really high, okay? So if I scroll up, I can gradually bring the fall off down to what actually makes sense for my donut, okay? Now this was actually a point, I was reading the comments on the last one. Vertices around it and it is moving it together as a whole. Now by default, your proportional size is really high, okay? So if I scroll up, I can gradually bring the fall off down to what actually makes sense for my donut.
Alright, so
grab and move it. Now, the hotkey for that is O, turn that on and off. What this will do is that now when I rotate scale or hit G to grab and move it, now it's actually grabbing vertices around it and it is moving it together as a whole. Now by default, your proportional size is really high, okay? So if I scroll up, I can gradually bring the fall off down to what actually makes sense for my donut, okay? Now this was actually a point, I was reading the comments on the last video, the last version of this I made, and this was a point that a lot of people got stuck on. If you can't see this ring here, just keep scrolling up, because it is there. If you see top left-hand corner, actually, it gives you the measurement. As I scroll, you can see the measurement of my front.
Oh shit!
What you're looking for is something like a 0.04. If you can't see 0.04 meters, just keep scrolling up until you see it. And if you are on trackpad, because those people also got stuck, because they're like, how do I scroll while I'm doing it? All you do is, on trackpad, you tap G, then do a single click, and then down here in the bottom left-hand corner, you've got those options again. And then you could adjust your proportional size to like a 0.04. And then if you move, you should see the correct proportional fall off, okay? Really, guys, invest in a mouse, please. Going trackpad, look, it's fine for Facebook, but like you're doing stuff in 3D, you gotta have a mouse, come on, all right. Okay, so now that I do this with my fall off radius, and if I just scroll up and down, I can adjust and I can make my donut look however I want, much more easily, okay? Make this part go out, maybe make this part have like a little lump and sort of skew if like that. Maybe this middle part, sort of like this, okay. And I'll do another one here, something like that. Okay. Oh, that's a little lopsided. It's a little bit repetitive of what's on that side. And this is maybe a little bit too far. Just sort of playing it by eye. But I have to keep this for the rest of the donut, for the rest of the tutorial. So I'm trying to do it well. Okay, and something else, by the way, another hotkey. You can see that if I want to move this up, if I was to move it like this, right? It's moved everything also left to right as well, okay? Because of my camera angle, okay? If I'm looking at something like this and I'm moving it, it is moving it across the donut. So it's scrunching everything going this way. That's not what I want. I want it to go directly up. So it means I have to get my camera angle like right down here to do that up. Alternatively, a better way, not to throw too many hotkeys at you, get my keyboard shortcuts if you haven't already, link in the description.
Yeah, that's
but
right
another
there.
hotkey is Alt-S, which instead of moving it just arbitrarily, this will now move it according to which direction those faces are pointing. And this is actually perfect for this exact case, because we've got, points, you know, rounded around it, and it's just, yeah, it's tedious to have to get my camera angle exactly right, when really I just want to be able to select certain parts and then pull them in and out. So Alt-S allows me to do that. The shrink and fatten tool is what it is called. But other softwares, I think they call it move along normals or something like that.
Holy shit.
All right. And then maybe the base as well. I think we should make it a little bit lopsided on the base. Move that down. Something like that. Now there is a sculpt tool, which we'll talk about when we get to the icing, that could also do this, but that is not the point of this tutorial. So I'm just doing proportional editing because, to be honest, like, this proportional editing is perfect for this kind of thing.
That's a fucking donut.
Cool. So it's just entering into edit mode to do your changes, going into object mode to see how it looks, and then swapping back out with tab again. And that's really all it is. I think this is too thick on this side now. Too lopsided. I went too far with the imperfections. But that also comes into like the style of it, of what you're doing. Yeah. Something like that. Oh, by the way, another side point I just mentioned. Well, I'm talking about object and edit mode, okay? A big problem a lot of beginners have that I find is that later on, you'll be like, I'll say, all right, so select your lamp and your camera or something like that. And they'll be like, oh, I can't click on it. What's happened? It's because you are still in edit mode, okay? Edit mode means you cannot click on anything else other than the object that you are editing. You're still in this. When you switch back to object mode, you're now able to click on any object in your scene, but in edit mode, it is locked to that view. So if you can't click on things, just remember, check what mode you're in. You're probably in edit mode. Switch to object mode and you'll be fine. Okay. Just to finish on something completely random, because why not? Just throw it in there just as a little Easter egg for those of you that made it to the end of the video. Here's something cool. If you go to select, there's an option there for select random, and this will just select at random vertices on your mesh, and then you've got a little ratio thing you could change down the bottom there. Then, if you used Alt-S, you would basically make a lumpy looking donut. So it's kind of like a quick way if you wanted to make a lumpy looking donut, you could do it that way. And also if you change the fall off type, okay, so this is that ring, that little circle that goes around it, right? If you changed it from the smooth one to sharp, then you would make it something else, like a spiky donut.
That doesn't work for me.
It actually looks better without the subsurf and like flat. It's like, no, it does not. Okay, I don't know what I was thinking with that. Anyways, all right, just something random to finish on. Okay, so play with your donut, get something that you like, and then join me in the next part to make renders like these, you need high quality assets, which is why I created Polygon, a library of models, textures, and HDRs
That's what I'm learning by myself.
3D software. Get started today at polygon.com. Welcome back to the Donut Show, where we make virtual donuts.
Oh, let's fucking make this donut, boys.
In this part, we're going to be making the icing. So, with our wonderful donut here selected, we're going to, well, first of all, yeah, like icing. I mean, you could do it a million ways. You could, like, add a plane and then, like, model it out and try and pull it down and then sculpt it and do a bunch of different ways. The easiest way, really, whenever you're doing something, is to, like, try to reuse part of your mesh wherever you can. So we've already got the shape of a donut. We can duplicate our donut, shave off half of it, and then we've basically got icing. So that's what we're going to do. So enter into edit mode, and we want to select half of our donut. So if we went into, you can see that, like if we looked at it from this, you know, if we drew, you can see we're missing part of it, right? Because it's like, this is one of those cases, is what I'm trying to say, where you need to use straight on, okay? So, or number pad 1, number pad 3, whatever you want to do, something like that. Okay, and by the way, when you use this, it also switches you to orthographic mode, okay? So perspective mode is where you've got the depth fall off, okay? And then orthographic mode.
Don't know if it's gonna work for me.
As if it was like on a focal length of like infinity, so you're seeing like the actual, what's the best way to describe it? No perspective, essentially, zero perspective. And you can toggle between that, by the way, also with a number pad 5 or by clicking this little gizmo on the right-hand side there at any point. It doesn't have to be in a certain view. Okay, cool. So if we were to just drag over this right now, it looks like we've got half of our donut. However, If
No,
you move
that
it
didn't
around,
work
you
for
will
me.
see we're missing the other half of it. Okay,
There we go.
and that's because it's hard. Okay, the mesh is hard, and therefore to select on the other side of it, we have to be able to see through it. And we can do that by going up here and toggling X-ray. Well, the hotkey for that is Alt-Z, and that will now show us right through it. And now when we drag over it, you can see that we've got exactly the top half of our donut all the way around. Okay, perfect. So we want to duplicate this and then separate it. Okay, so I'm going to hit Shift D, which is how you duplicate, or you can go up to Mesh and then click on Duplicate, wherever that would be. Right there, duplicate at the top. Yeah, but Shift D. Okay, now when you do that, you can see that it is now locked onto my cursor, okay, and it's telling me, where do you want to place this duplicate? And I don't. I want to leave it exactly where it was. So if I hit escape or right click, it's going to cancel the movement and put exactly where it was, but it is now duplicated it. Now what we want to do is move this to its own objects, because you can see that we've now got vertices on top of vertices, and they need to be their own separate objects. So to do that, the hotkey is P. P for part of the mesh. Go to another, I don't know. It's P. For whatever reason, it's always been P.
Shift D. Escape. Did it do it?
And P for, as you can see, that we've now got vertices on top of vertices, and they need to be their own separate objects. So to do that, the hotkey is
I'm so confused. What the fuck am I saying? One sec, I am. There we go. Okay, not top house. This is trippy as fuck. What the hell? I am. Okay. Let's edit mode.
is P own exactly where it was. You do that, you can see right there, duplicate at the top. Yeah, but Shift D. Okay, now when you do that, you can see that it is now locked onto my cursor, okay, and it's telling me, where do you want to place this duplicate? And
Yes.
I don't. I want to leave it exactly where it was. So if I hit escape or right click, it's going to cancel the movement and put exactly where it was, but it is now duplicated it. Now what we want to do is move this to its own objects, because you can see that we've now got vertices on top of vertices, and they need to be their own separate objects. So to do that, the hotkey is P. P for part of the mesh. Go to another, I don't know. It's P. For whatever reason, it's always been P. And we're looking for selection. So separate by the selected part of the mesh.
Oh, perfect.
And now, in object mode, if we switch out of X-ray mode, you can see that we now have two objects. And actually, we can see them up here in the outline as well. Okay. And now, just very quickly, because I know that some of you will have just messed up accidentally, and you are now screaming at the screen, "Oh no, how am I going to fix this?" When you did this step, you duplicated it, you right-click to cancel it, and then you accidentally did a single click. If you clicked something else, you've now got mesh on top of a mesh, and you don't know which vertex is which. Like, which is the one that was the one that you just made, right? Or which one is the actual donut. So if you ever run into this problem, what you can do is to select only things that are connected, because these are no longer connected, right? There's bits that are not connected. It's Control L, or just mouse over it and then just hit a single L. L for loose parts. Is it? I don't know what it is. Link. Oh, it's linked. Okay, select linked. There you go. Then when you do that, you can actually find the right part of your mesh. Okay, so now I've actually just got just my donut and then just my icing. Fantastic. Okay, so up here in the outliner, you can see 2 objects, and it's probably a good time to name it, okay? So you can name it by just double-clicking in the outliner. We can call it icing. Another way to name it is if you've just got your object selected anywhere in your 3D viewport. It's the same hotkey as Windows renaming files. It's F2. F2. I'm going to type in donut. And there we go. So 2 things, and we could organize it however we want. Cool. So our icing is currently looking like a skin-tight something. It's got to have some thickness to it, okay? And we can do that with the modifiers. Okay, so going over here to your modifier stack again, we are looking for something called the solidify modifier right here. There really needs to be a search function for the modifier stack, but there's just a lot here at the moment. So solidify, okay. Now when we do this, you might not have actually really seen much change. If you went into wireframe mode, which you could do by hitting Z
Not
and
much
then dragging
change.
to the left to go wireframe, or up here, so this is solid view mode, this is wireframe mode, okay? In wireframe mode, we're able to see just the raw mesh without any faces. You can see that it looks like a donut within a donut, but it's got thickness to it, but it is pointing it in the wrong direction. So this offset setting here from -1, we want to change that to 1. And now go back to solid view. Okay, so that is like a doona of icing. It's a lot. So we're going to turn our thickness down to be something a little more reasonable. And by the way, when you're dragging these values here, here's a tip. You can see that it's like really hard to control because subtle movements is what I need, but it's moving it by a lot. If you hold down Shift, that is not incremental. What is it? Smooth movements? Subtle movements. Yeah. Anyways, holding down Shift when you need to use small numbers. And Control, by the way, will snap it to increments. So I use that.
Yeah, why this looks so fucking weird.
Shift for smooth movements and Control for incremental or both.
Why can I see smooth?
Like subtle and incremental.
Oh, there we go.
Anyways, all right. I'm giving you all the hotkeys and everything at once. I hope it is not too much for you. All right, I'm gonna go for like something like a 0.0015 of icing because I want it to look somewhat thick, but like not too thick. Okay. Now, something to keep in mind is that this edge here, it looks kind of weird for a lot of reasons. If we went into flat shading mode, you can see that it's created like a hat, a hat on our donut. Okay, and the reason for that is a lot of reasons. If we went into flat shading mode, you can see that it's created like a hat, a hat on our donut. This edge here, it looks kind of weird for a lot of reasons. If we went into flat shading mode, you can see that it's created like a hat, a hat on our donut. Okay, and the reason for that is the order of our modifiers here. So a modifier is, what is the best way to think of it? Well, it's working from top to bottom. That's how we'll describe it. Okay, modifiers are fantastic because at any point we can change these settings. It is a non-destructive way of working. This subdivision setting that I had before, I think it's too high, so I can come in here and I can change these settings, okay? Make it lighter. If it was not, if I was to apply it or I did it a different way, I could not change those settings. Non-destructive, it is fantastic. It also means that, it's working from top to bottom. So what I want to do is move this above my subdivision, which I can do by just dragging these dots at the top here, just dragging that up, and you can see that now it's doing if I just turn that off, it's doing the thickness part first, and then it is smoothing it, which means that edge there that was like this before is now being forced to go like this because of the subsurf, because it adds those points and then it kind of averages them out, which is, how subdiv works. There we go. Cool. So now, I don't know, now that thickness doesn't look like enough, so I'll just increase that a little bit, and I'm going to go shade smooth again.
Did I fuck up?
Okay. Lovely. Well, we made good time. Yeah, let's just jump to the next video. We're actually going to start modeling in the dripping parts of our icing in the next part and doing a little bit of sculpting.
What the fuck?
So click here to join me in the next part.
This feels like something I could change for the next stream. In that case, thank you for watching. That was my first stream, I guess, where
Join over 1 million 3D art.
I attempted to make a donut. My first, well, not my first time using Blender. This is like, we used Blender a good couple times, but yeah.